Ciao amici. I hope you are in the best of your spirits and as motivated as you could be to become a part of India's system of governance. So, let us take 10 more questions and continue to learn the system of governance that you wish to join and are affected by it even today, every day. As always, keep your copy of the Constitution of India handy for reference. And for best learning, I recommend you pause the video after each question is displayed. Mark your own answer in maximum 1 minute. If you need to, then open your book quickly to refer and only then proceed to listen. This will improve your understanding, memory, as well as ability to recall when required. You may also join the Telegram channel mentioned in the description for more quizzes and other relevant information. And do focus on the parallel silent quiz running in the video on the right hand side. I'm sure you'll learn a thing or two more. Alright, so let's begin with the first question. And that is, the Constitution of India has used various terms, expressions regarding classes of citizens. Okay, which of the following are among those expressions? I'm sure the first thing that should come to your mind immediately is Article 15, which talks about special provisions for socially and educationally backward classes of citizens. Right, so this is where itself you'll see both of them are used. Also in Article 16, which talks about special provisions for backward classes of citizens. If you have never read this or have come across, then Article 46 of the Constitution, the DPSPs, it talks about promoting with special care educational and economic interests of the weaker sections of people. So this is also used, and there are many more references, regarding the Commission for Backward Classes and other kind of provisions are there. But essentially, all these three terms have been used in the Constitution somewhere or the other. So not a typical kind of a question, but it does see that how much you are able to recall in your head the ways in which citizens can be classified. Okay, so let's move on to the next question, and that is which of the following statements is or are correct regarding the languages under the Constitution of India? Okay, so if you see, it says it shall be the duty of the Union to promote and spread the Hindi language. Absolutely correct. This is there in Article 351 of the Constitution. In fact, I'll definitely recommend you please read it. This is not an article people usually read, but it's just a one long sentence. It's a very beautiful sentence. In fact, let me read it for you here. It will say that the purpose behind promoting the spread of Hindi language is to serve as a medium of expression for all the elements of the composite culture of India and to secure its enrichment. Okay, secure the enrichment by assimilating without interfering with its genius, the form, style, and expression used in Hindustani and in other languages of India of the 8th schedule, and by drawing wherever necessary for its vocabulary, primarily on Sanskrit and secondarily on other languages also, right? So it is talking about that melting pot of languages. It is not about enforcing Hindi over other languages. So the spirit, if you see, I'm sure you'll be very happy, and the style of putting that melting pot together in 351 is actually a very fascinating one. So please read that. I will definitely recommend. So this is a correct statement. Then it says there is no tribal language recognized under the 8th schedule. No, that's not correct. We have got Bodo, we have Santhali, right? So there are tribal languages, but as such, there is no recognition called tribal language. Remember that in the Constitution. So this is wrong. Only the first statement is correct. So let us go to the next question now, and that is which of the following statements is or are correct regarding motion of thanks to the President's address? Okay, so the first statement says the first session after each general election and first session of every financial year is addressed by the President. In earlier videos, I remember I did ask you to read Article 87 in this context. And if you have read that, you would know that it's not the financial year here. Even though I've seen some books do write financial year. No, financial year begins from April and goes on till 31st March of the next year. So when it talks about the address of the President, it's a regular year. It's a calendar year. In fact, the original provision was, original Constitution, that President shall address every session, every year. right? So in a way, 3 sessions every year as a convention, so 3 addresses will be there. But then it was changed, it was felt it was not really necessary. So after that, now it is just the first session of every year, okay? Of course, after the election, the session is also addressed by the president. So don't get confused. So this is actually wrong. And then it says, such a motion is put to vote in both the houses of parliament. Yes, absolutely, it is put to vote in both the houses. Though if it is not passed in Rajya Sabha, it doesn't have any real significance per se. Of course, it is a matter of disappointment and kind of a shame for the government, but it will have bigger repercussions in Lok Sabha, and that will come to in one of the questions which is coming up in this video itself. All right, so only the second statement is correct here, and that gentleman there, Sun Yat-sen, the great philosopher, politician of China, and the first provisional president of the Republic of China. Okay, and this Republic of China, as you know, was established on the principles of democracy in 1912, right? But lasted only until 1949 as it transformed itself into the People's Republic of China, right? Today, the term Republic of China is used to refer to Taiwan, and he has been largely forgotten today. I mean, well, almost forgotten. But still, the pro-democracy people, and especially a lot many in Taiwan, still recognize him and revere him. His party, the Kuomintang, or as translated to the Chinese Nationalist Party, has ruled in Taiwan for long. If it was for him, and if he could have been successful, China today would be world's largest democracy. But I don't know, good or bad, it is not, because India is the world's largest democracy. Anyway, well, not a good question for all of you. I think the problem was in this financial year issue. Now, never be confused in this area. Let's go to the next question, and that is, after Election Commission has compiled the list of members, elected to a particular house, that is Lok Sabha or State Assembly, who issues the appropriate notification for the due constitution of the house. Well, I thought even a guess would be easy, but anyway, under RPA 1951, very clearly it is provided that the Election Commission will issue a notification with the list of all the successful candidates, and on the issue of that notification, the constitution of the houses is to be deemed, right? So it is the notification of the Election Commission which has the effect of constitution of the house. Nothing extraordinary in this. And I hope you recognize this gentleman here, the one who, brought the ideas of the Marxist-Leninist thoughts in China. So you had Sun Yat-sen earlier, and then he was removed, and then the Communist Party of China took over in 1949 and declared itself as the People's Republic of China. The term "people's" is primarily to give that communist flavor. Otherwise, it was already a Republic of China. Anyway, so moving on to the next question. Which of the following statements is or are correct regarding the anti-defection law? Okay. First statement says that the presiding officer of the house is empowered to make rules to give effect to the provisions of anti-defection law. Yes, this is correct, and I guess a lot of you did consider this correct. It's in the anti-defection law in the 10th schedule. It is very clearly mentioned that the presiding officer will be making rules, and the rules are already are in place. Then it says the person who's not a member of the house may also file a petition seeking disqualification of a member. Now, this is actually the learning point I wanted to give, because many people are not aware about this. Yes, this is absolutely possible. In fact, there was a case regarding the Odisha Legislative Assembly versus Utkal Keshari Parida. Not long ago, 2013, and Mr. Parida was the state party president of the Nationalist Congress Party, NCP, and he filed a petition, and he was not a member of the Odisha Legislative Assembly, and finally the Supreme Court clarified that such a petition is also maintainable, even though the rules actually specify that it should be a member, but the courts have said no. Many situations it is perhaps not possible that a member would be filing the petition before the presiding officer. So yes, even people who are not members, they may be able to file a petition before the presiding officer under anti-defection law. Please know that. So actually both of these are correct statements here for us. Well, Anyway, I think the second point is what is your learning. So that's good. Moving on to the next point, next question, which of the following is or are explicit provisions? Okay. So there may be provisions. The question is, are they explicit? Explicit provisions made in the Constitution of India. Okay. During the vacancy in the office of President of India as well as the Vice President of India, the Chief Justice of India shall discharge the duties of the President. Now this statement is correct. Yes, this is what happens, but it is not provided in the Constitution. Okay, so this is actually a wrong statement. This is a provision of the President Discharge of Duties Act, which was made in 1969 when this incident actually happened for the first time, and Chief Justice Hidayatullah discharged the duties. Anyway, so second statement is a person can contest election to the Lok Sabha or to the state assemblies from the two constituencies. Yes, this is also possible, but this is not a provision in the Constitution of India. Okay, this is a provision which comes from the Representation of People's Act. So even though the statements are correct, for the question that is asking, these are actually wrong answers. Okay, so both of them are actually wrong, and none of them are actually explicitly provided in the Constitution of India. And lo and behold, be careful with these questions, because sometimes what happens, the statement is correct but it's still wrong, or the other way around, the statement may be wrong but it could be correct for the question because it's asking which is not provided. So just be careful. That should not be the reason to not be able to score or score negative. Okay, so let's move on to the next question, and that is the responsibility of conducting the decennial census of India is vested with. I'm sure a lot of you could easily attempt this question. So the census actually is conducted by the Office of the Registrar General and the Census Commissioner, and that comes under the Ministry of Home Affairs. I'm sure you know that the first census of India was conducted in 1872, and then from 1881 the decennial synchronous census is being conducted. I hope you also realize that 2021, which is just half of a year away, is the census year of India, and hence little important for 2020 and 2021 exams, right? So do prepare a short summary, about I guess half a page of short note of all the basic information on census. I'm sure it will be useful for you. Okay, so let's go to the next question, and that is the passage of which of the following motions, remember the passage of the motions in the Lok Sabha would necessarily result in the resignation of the government. Okay, motion of no confidence, the most obvious to choose here. Of course, if it is passed, motion of no confidence, the Prime Minister will have to resign, the government will fall. Definitely this is one of the options for us. Motion of thanks to the President's address. Well, motion of thanks to the President's address is a good thing, right? President's address is the government's address. A lot of people got confused in this option, I have realized. See, if motion of thanks is passed, the government is the happiest one. Now let's see if it is not passed. Now please understand, if motion of thanks to the President's address is not passed, then there is no clarity, because it has never happened in Lok Sabha. I mean, that will be a very demeaning thing for the government. But if it happens, the understanding is that then the President will ask the Council of Ministers to bring a confidence motion, right? That you please prove your confidence, and it's kind of an insult that has happened to the President, the head of the executive. So until the confidence is proved, no further work can be done. So it will also actually not result in the resignation immediately. But anyway, for this question, there is no doubt. There should not be any doubt. Censor motion is just criticism. It does not result into any kind of resignation of the government. Or similarly in the adjournment motion also. Yes, there is a component of censure in adjournment as well. It's criticism because it's bringing the attention of the government to a very important public issue. But none of this actually results into the resignation as such. Ideally, they should not even be passed against the will of the government. But yeah, so you may see, if they are passed, a confidence motion coming in or something like that. But yes, it's not necessary. Only for motion of no confidence getting passed, it will result into the rejection of the Council of Ministers, the dissolution of the Council of Ministers. So only the first is your correct statement. So let us move on to the next question, and that is this. During which of the following situations the Union Parliament may legislate on the subjects in the state list? Okay, national emergency, I'm sure you know, under the provisions that have been made in Article 252, it's very clearly, sorry, 250, it's very clearly mentioned that during national emergency, Parliament can do that. And it's like states can also do that. So it's like a concurrent jurisdiction that is acquired during national emergency. During President's rule, the state list virtually becomes again under the control of the union list. State assembly may be dissolved or it may be under suspended animation. In any case, they cannot make the law. While in national emergency, they can still make the law. In President's rule, they cannot make the law. Only the Parliament makes the law. And during financial emergency, there is no such power that is given to the Parliament of India to legislate. Please also be very clear in terms of the validity of these kind of legislations. During national emergency, when Parliament legislates like this, then such a law remains valid for 6 months after the emergency is over, or rather after the declaration of emergency is over, and the state may adopt it to take it beyond 6 months also. Okay. In President's rule, it's slightly different. So in President's rule, when the law is made by the Parliament on the state subject in a particular state, then this law remains valid indefinitely. It is a permanent law. It is a permanent law. Okay. Until, of course, the state legislature repeals it. So they can repeal it. So the provisions are slightly different. They're very logical also. Why? So make sure you are very clear in these things as well. So half of you got it right, which is okay. So let's go to the last question that we have in this video, and that is differential cutoff marks in the UPSC civil service exam for various categories, classes of aspirants can be directly justified from the constitutional principle of. A very important question, I believe, especially because you all are preparing for civil service, and many times I see a lot of resentment to do with the differential cutoff marks among the students who feel as if they are suffering because of this, who are losing out because of this. Well, of course, there are some higher principles being deployed here. See, equality before law. I'm sure you know that this is the British concept where the law applies equally to everyone, where the more positive concept is the equal protection of law, which is more from the United States. And this is where the positive discrimination comes in, right? Equal protection of law. That means the equals only should be treated equal. So unequals should not be treated equal, right? So if there are classes of citizens, they can be differentially treated, and it may look like a discrimination, but it is a positive discrimination. So actually this is the answer, but let's see, procedure established by law. Now that also can be used, because if there is a law which provides and the law has been made by the procedures that are required, then the law should be valid. But that way anything is there. But the justification doesn't come from this, right? It just gives it a validity kind of a thing. Now, okay, it's a valid law. Even bigger argument can always be made for due process of law, because in due process of the law is not just through the procedure, but it is a fair law, it is a just law, it's a reasonable law, right? But again, that is more on the validity of the law rather than the justification completely. Partly the justification may be there. So how do we justify having this is essentially the principle of equal protection of law, where you are allowed to have different cutoff marks for the different candidates. Anyway, never be confused. And looking at this gentleman here, you may have heard this popular jibe, people take on India's growth by comparing with Singapore as to how the Republic of Singapore was formed in 1965, which is much later than India's independence of 1947. Yet Singapore is a name to reckon with in the global market, much bigger than India today. Well, reasons can always be given from our side, but for Singapore, this man here, in his lifetime achieved it. The first Prime Minister of Singapore, who was in power for 30 years, Lee Kuan Yew, or better known as LKY with his initials. And the great thing is, in one generation itself, just one generation, this person's lifetime, he was the first Prime Minister, as I said, Singapore transformed itself from a developing third world country to a developed country. And that's an amazing thing. I totally believe that. Let's not justify everything just because we are not able to do it. And that too was done when in those days Malaysia was likely to subdue Singapore, as Singapore did depend on Malaysia for a lot of resources. And Mahathir Mohamad, who was a great leader and visionary in power in Malaysia. And it was not easy for Lee. He took some very strong and very controversial decisions. If you read, you'll get to know. But today, everyone looks back at them as necessary to bring Singapore out of the rut of corruption and population explosion. Corporal punishment in the form of caning is still a legal method of punishment in Singapore. And he was a big promoter. The great thing I find, in one line if I have to summarize, is the spirit he brought about in Singapore in general is the persevered spirit to implement a solution and not fall in rhetorics and dialogues and political dramatics. Of course, credit goes to the people of Singapore who understood what is really needed in their leadership. For example, the acute problem of clean water in Singapore, today water recycling is a big thing there. He died a few years back. I suggest learn about how he did it and what he did. And in the spirit of what we can learn from him, I thought in today's video, I will leave you with a word which is very popular in Indian scriptures to how to keep oneself on track. Right? Many times we get deviated. Always remember this word called dharma. This dharma is not religion. Understand it. This is the sense of duty. This is the sense of duty which drives you to do something, and I think that is what is motivating the great civil servants of India in these testing times of COVID-19, where I see some aspirants are not able to even study well what to talk about leading the nation sometime. That's the behavior that is expected from a great civil servant, to know your duty, to know what is expected out of you. Think about it, ponder on it. I'll come back with 10 more questions. Till then, study well. Thank you very much.